by first, we'll introduce ourselves, the facilitators, and then we'll have you starting to get engaged in learning stuff. So Jennifer, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Blue. I'm a professor in the Department of Physics, but that's probably not really why I'm here. I also get to work with the Center for Teaching Excellence and the graduate school and teach some of I teach the GSTEP course and some of the courses for the certificate in college teaching. So I get to meet a lot of graduate students from across the university and talk to you all about life as a professor in addition to life as a TA.
Awesome.
It's a great life. I
Yeah,
recommend.
Jennifer's got a lot of experience in supporting a ton of graduate students on that journey. So I'm excited that
And some of you are
you
here.
can make
Hello,
it.
people I already know.
Yeah, it's fun to see some names that we recognize. So I'll just introduce myself super quick. I'm Ellen Yuzurski. I'm a professor of chemistry, and I'm the director for the Center for Teaching Excellence. And so today's session is going to focus on, you want to be a professor. Cool. Let's talk more about that. But before we get started, can everybody go to the chat window and do two things for me? The first thing is that can you just go ahead and open up this little Google Doc? That's going to help orient us for some early work together today. And then the second thing, can you type the graduate program that you're in? And so your name will pop up and the grad program you're in, and we can just get a better sense of who's here and what you do. And what you do and what your passion is, what you think about, that all should be tied to your grad program. Let's hope so. And then could you take a quick moment as people are doing this and scroll through and see who's joining us today, see which peers are joining us. One of the benefits of getting together with people from other disciplines is you learn to look at the world differently. And if we don't talk to each other, then we just stay in our little bubble, and that's not cool. Okay. All right, so this is great. So when we're talking to non-specialists, people that aren't in our fields, and we're dropping acronyms, right? Other people don't know what they are. So if you happen to be using jargon or an acronym, could you elaborate so that everybody else in the group can see what it is that you do? Like, what is CMSB? Right?
I used to know and I just looked it up.
There it is. And see? But let's lay it out for everybody. And then again, please take a moment to scroll up and have a peek at the expertise that is here with us today. I mean, people are uncovering the latest and greatest things in these fields, and you're on this call today. That is lit. I love it. You're here doing this.
Even just looking at the different ways to engage with kinds of biology and kinds of psychology is interesting too.
It is, and it's
Just
almost
make
like
everyone
there's,
type thesis titles and then we'll get
yeah.
really into it.
Well, and they're really, in a lot of fields, they're kind of looked at as separate disciplines, which I think is really interesting. So, we talk about there's that kind of narrow focus of a department, but even within departments and within programs, right? We've got, like the neurobiologists are doing way different things than the evolutionary biologists and such. So
it's true.
Very cool. All right, so let's just double check. Has everybody had an opportunity to enter their graduate program? If you haven't, do it, because we want to see who's here. Fantastic. This is looking great. Thank you so much. So I love the diversity of fields that we have today. That should make our conversation on the spicy side. If everybody could go ahead and click on that doc. I'll go ahead and paste that link one more time for everybody. This is just a Google Doc that's got some info to guide us today. So if everybody can get there, and you'll start to see lots of little faces and initials and stuff at the top as people join. And so what Jennifer and I wanted to do was make this session about you. I mean, you know some stuff and you have curiosities and questions and things. And so to make it really targeted to your needs, we wanted to have it be driven by your questions and your ideas. And so we have these little bullet points to get you kind of thinking. But what we were hoping is that what the members of this group put in the chat, you know, that'll end up driving our discussion. So we want to give you a few minutes to do a little bit of free writing on your own, a little bit of free thinking, formulate some questions, pop them in the chat, and then Jennifer and I will divide and conquer and kind of go through. And then to follow back up on Jennifer's introduction, Jennifer mentioned the Graduate Student Teaching Enhancement Program in addition to the Graduate Certificate in College Teaching. There are links to those programs there, and it's under Develop Skills to Prepare for Teaching, Mentoring, Training, and Directing, and or a Career in Academia. So I think something to kind of broaden thinking is that, you know, if you understand how people learn and you understand how to teach effectively, it doesn't just help you in a traditional teaching role. It actually helps you wherever you're mentoring or training or developing or directing. So, you know, you can kind of think about the development of those skills more broadly. Okay, so the question, yes, you cannot edit the Google Doc. The questions go in the chat, if you would please.
Yeah, for always.
Yeah, just drop them in the chat, and that chat transcript is going to be a way for us to keep track of what people are thinking. All right, so thank you for that, and we're just going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes to generate some questions, and then we'll get started. And, you know, if you have questions after we get started, those are cool too.
Starting out with a super popular question.
Yeah, this is good. And then it sounds like it's resonating with others in the group, which is great. Let's go ahead and just leave a little bit more time, and that way we could get a whole bunch of cool questions queued up, and then we can start jumping in, because I'm worried if people are kind of trying to listen and generate questions at the same time, they're not going to be able to, you know, engage as much. And these already are starting out as quite exciting. So go you, keep generating these great questions. And here's the other thing. This is, you know, this is a place like we have no stake in any particular career path for you. I think it's really important to know that Dr. Blue and I want to do what supports you in doing what you ultimately want to do. And that's it. There's really no hidden agenda. I know it sounds a little bit boring, but it's kind of true. We just want to help you figure out what it is that you want to do next, and then support you on that path. All right, let's give it about one more minute to generate some questions in the chat. Thanks, everybody. I think we've got enough content here for a whole session. So congratulations. That's amazing. All right, so if it's okay with you, we will just kind of maybe start at the top and work our way down, even though we're going to end up, I think, jumping around because a lot of the things that people have asked about are somewhat related. What's interesting is that I know that Jennifer has uh, addressed a lot of these questions before in the graduate student teaching enhancement program. And there's actually things that like align with the curriculum in that program. So Jennifer, where do you think it would be best to start here?
Questions about teaching experience. I think we are both good at that, and different kinds of institutions and different kinds of jobs. I know I can say without having met everybody that I know not everyone's going to get a tenure track teaching position right out of graduate school. There just aren't enough of those. And not everybody, it seems, wants one. So that's a nice alignment with reality.
All right, that sounds great. So do we want to stop then at the start at the top one? The first.
It's also related to questions about getting stuck in adjuncting and yeah.
So this idea about opportunities to teach, to be in the professoriate without it being a tenure track position. So yeah, let's talk about the range of those. You want to start with that, Jennifer?
Sure. And you know, at least one of you said the tenure track jobs are the gold standard, and that's probably what your advisors have. And it's what Ellen and I are lucky enough to have, but at some point it is luck. And that's a job where you start at a university on the tenure track as an assistant professor. And and you have to, most places do teaching and research and service. If you're on the tenure track, after about 5 years, you go through a rigorous evaluation when people from both within and without of your university talk about how awesome you are. And then you get, if you're in Miami at that point, almost everybody gets promotion and tenure. So you can become an associate professor and you can be a tenured professor. And it is difficult to fire tenured professors, though possible. There are things we could do to lose our jobs. I'm not sure exactly what they are, but I know they're out there. And the bonus of this is that it is multiple year contracts. You know, I have friends who are early in the tenure track, and some of them are desperate to stay there for always, and some of them are thinking, well, I'm thinking of this as a 5-year contract, maybe renewable for life. And lots of other jobs in academia are 1-year contracts. And that is sometimes stressful. When you are young and energetic, it is kind of fun to move to a new town every couple of years, but at some point, lots of people want more permanence. Not
Right.
everybody.
So I think that at a lot of universities, they have positions are um, that are maybe not tenured. They don't call them tenured, but sometimes like I know in California, they talk about a job with security of employment. And so if you work there for a certain amount of years and you have a good record of your work, then you can get security of employment. And so you don't necessarily have to be tenured to have that job security. The other thing to think about is that it's important to think about like what you want to do every day, right? And so if you want to be engaged in a combination of like research and teaching, the tenure track is pretty much built for that, right? But if you want to be engaged only in teaching, there are these different kinds of career paths that you can go on, and going the adjunct teaching kind of route, I think has less security of employment. That's kind of what Jennifer, right? You were talking about some of your friends that might have positions that are not um, secure, like from year to year, right? We also at Miami, we call those visiting assistant professor positions, and those positions are year to year. And so it what's tricky is there's a lot of variability from school to school and state to state in terms of how the employment systems work. And at private schools, private universities, it might be completely different. So it it's useful to explore the places and the types of schools that you might want to work at and see kind of what the job structures are. And then once you figure that out, then you can kind of more, refine your goals.
And even at Miami, it's not as dire as I was making it sound. I mean, we have two teaching professors in my department, and they both teach primarily in huge classes that happen all the time. So we've essentially, they do have contracts that are for 1 year at a time, but we've told them as long as there are engineers and pre-meds at Miami, we expect you will have jobs. So it might be a false promise, but we see no reason to lose them.
Yeah, and
So,
I think it's really interesting, the language that's come up, this idea gold standard, I think to, to, to contextualize things a bit, if you are earning a PhD, then you're currently working with people who whose role it is to mentor and nurture new researchers, right? So like by virtue of those of you that are earning a PhD, and many of you are earning master's degrees, right? The person you're working with is that's their world, right? And I think that for the most part, our goal as mentors is not to replicate ourselves, but rather to, provide you with, to help you discover something new, discover some things about yourself and develop some skills that you can go off and do great things in the world. And, I think that sometimes there's a perception that there's an expectation that we just do what our advisor does. Okay. And I really think most advisors at Miami don't say, hey, you should be me, and, you know, you should be just like me. I don't think most people think that. If they do, that's not the best. But anyway, they probably don't. The point is that it's more about, you're just being, you kind of have a narrow exposure because you're in a PhD program working with somebody whose role it is to develop new scholars in the field. And so I think that's a benefit of the GSTEP program, because the curriculum specifically has the students explore lots of different kinds of academic jobs. And so, you could sign up for GSC 601, even if you're not in the certificate program, and do some exploration with Jennifer Blue or Pete Wessels, the instructors in the program, um, to try and explore some other academic careers. Jennifer, you want to talk a little bit more about the GSC 601 class and how there's a lot of goodies in there, I think, that pertain to the questions that have been posed today.
Yeah, the GOC 601 class, and I know I'm not the only one here who has been through that, so people can add or contradict if you like in the chat, but or just unmute and start saying, no, 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 she's wrong. It's a 1 credit, no credit course that meets every semester. And so it's low stress, it's a low stress, no homework class. And what you need to do in that class is go to 8 seminars about teaching at the college level. And Dr. Wessels or I, whoever's teaching it, will provide 5 of those that you can go to. And then there are always professional development opportunities at Miami. So that's the hidden curriculum of that course, is to find out more about the professional development opportunities at Miami. The Center for Teaching Excellence that Ellen is the director of has lots of programs. The Howe Writing Center has programs. Miami Online has programs. I know they've been very popular in the last 12 months or so, 11 months or so. And you can run around and go to all those programs where you will be in the same room and in the same workshop with faculty and staff. And I read reflections of students in the GSTEP program who usually say it's great to sit with faculty side by side doing a workshop about teaching. And every once in a while, they also say, I'm shocked that this 60-year-old faculty member didn't already know this thing that we were learning in this workshop about teaching. And then you realize you're a very lucky graduate student that you get to go to all of this stuff. And you don't have to be in GSTEP to start going to those professional development programs. If you're not already, you can get on the CTE's mailing list.
I'm going to put that in the chat really quick
and
for
have
everybody.
all of that available to you. And I know the people at the Writing Center and e-learning are also really excited to talk to graduate students, whether or not you are TAs. If you're thinking about teaching, it's a good time to start talking about teaching.
Yeah, so I'm just popping in the chat here. This is the sign up link for the CTE Weekly. I'll also put it in that in the Google Doc that you can refer to after. But this is a weekly newsletter we put out every Tuesday. And the first part of the newsletter are development opportunities. And those development opportunities are always related to teaching. Now, keeping teaching kind of open, right? So teaching in this case means like in the classroom, but it also means in mentoring other mentoring students in research. And so a number of you mentor undergraduates. Guess what? That's teaching, right? That is teaching. And you're developing teaching experience when you're mentoring undergraduates in research. So keep that in mind. We're there, to nurture and support your development in that area. But I think it also goes back to one of the questions that was in the chat, this idea about, I gotta find it, sorry. Something about how to get teaching experience. There it is.
What skills can you highlight?
Yeah, like if you don't have a lot of teaching experience, what skills can you highlight to help in your job applications?
So yeah, a lot of you are
mentoring undergrads.
A lot of you are mentoring undergraduates, and there's official and unofficial ways to do that at Miami. And you can think back to other things you've done. You may have tutored, you may have worked as a camp counselor or a scout leader or in community theater. Like there's lots of different ways to teach people things, and not all of them are based in the classroom. So it may be that you have just been the smart kid in your class who takes over the group work and explains things to other people. That is also teaching. So I'm sure that Ellen has seen some of the same things, since we're both in the hard sciences, where if graduate students are lucky, they only teach a little bit and they tend not to teach their own classes. They'll be someone's TA in a lab. I know some of you in the biological sciences might be experiencing that. And then maybe you'll be paid on a research associate position and then go be a postdoc and concentrate on research only for several years. And by the time you apply to be a faculty member, you're like, I helped in an undergraduate lab 10 years ago. Does that
And
count?
yeah,
And
and I
it,
think,
it
yeah,
sometimes counts.
well, and I think that what a lot of people who are strategic do is they think about like not just doing stuff and learning stuff, but like how can I evidence that I've learned some stuff. So when you're like, here's an example: when you're talking with your PI, your research advisor, your mentor, whatever we call maybe the person who is directing your graduate work, when you're talking with that person about working with the undergrads, you can say, hey, well, you're asking me to train undergrads on this procedure over and over and over. Like every time new students join the group, I need to train them on this procedure. What about if I make a Canvas module that they can do beforehand and get some background and build some skills, before I introduce them to things in the lab. So think about now what this does, right? You're making your work with your undergrads easier. You can develop this little Canvas module. Your advisor can give you input and feedback on it so you can iteratively improve it. And now you've got something really concrete to talk about in a job interview. Because you can say, well, I have some experience in curriculum development. I developed a module to support onboarding new undergraduates to our lab. And it's like, whoa, that's really concrete. It's a really great kind of artifact of your skill development. And if you really want to do that stuff and do it for like some kind of recognizable credit, you could be in our graduate certificate of college teaching, where you actually do a teaching project at the end of the experience. And then you have this credential on your CV and on your transcript that says that you've developed some skills. Now you have to take some classes, do some other things. But the point is that you want to be able to, discuss and have evidence for the skill development that you're doing in all of these things that Jennifer was describing as teaching experience.
And it's also true. I mean, Ellen was talking about how sometimes it feels like your mentors want to make you into them, and you may not be allowed to teach at Miami University. We sometimes in the departments won't hire our own PhD students. So you can't literally be a mini-me of your research mentor. But if you have the strength to ask them, or you need us to go ask them because we probably know them and can be like, stop being intimidating. But we at Miami usually have friends from our graduate and undergraduate years who are doing very different things. So I have a friend from graduate school who works at NASA because she decided when she was a graduate student that she hated teaching and never wanted to do that again. So I said, thank you very much for not being a professor, and she's not. And I have a friend from college who does not want a tenure track job. She has walked away from 2 of them that she didn't like, and she puts most of her energy into teaching a math camp to genius high school kids in the summer. And to get the rest of her income, she adjuncts at the grade 5 colleges near Amherst. So she teaches 1 or 2 classes every semester or 2 for extra income. And, she knows calculus, so she can do that. But, and some people who teach at tiny colleges that I wouldn't have heard of if I didn't have a friend teaching at them, and some teaching at places like Indiana and Ohio State and Purdue, these huge schools where they're producing PhD students all the time. And we all know people who work at the regional campuses of Miami, where even though it's the same school, the day-to-day teaching life sometimes feels different. And so we could get you people to job shadow. I know the psychology professors and biology professors know people who aren't in academia at all if you decide this is not what you want. There's lots of research-only positions as well as teaching-only positions, even in big enough universities. And you could also volunteer to say, even if you don't have a job as a teaching assistant, especially when we get back to actually leaving our town to go to conferences, You can say, you know, like if ever you're not there, I could do your class for a week. You know, if that's helpful even during virtual conferences. I know I've tried to go to conferences and do my whole job at the same time. And
It's
even
pretty
though I don't
tough.
have to get up from my chair, it's a lot. So um, you could always volunteer if you are really, you know, you have a favorite piece of neuroscience or something. You say, can I be in charge of your class that week? I think most professors will not say no if you want to do our jobs for us for a minute.
In scrolling through the questions, I'm like, okay, we could address that. There are some that make me really uncomfortable. Like I just don't feel qualified to comment on like the post-COVID higher education scene. Okay, I, mm, I appreciate that people think that we've got these mad skills, but to be fair, I'm really uncomfortable with that. Here's what I will say. I hope that all the things that we've learned, that people don't just like try to hit a reset button and say, okay, we're going to go back to how it was before, because we've learned a ton um, during this time, and it's hard to believe that it's not going to change kind of the nature of how we interact and the nature of what goes on in research circles and in teaching circles. But I think that we should regroup in a year, and then we can look at how it is. Because I don't know. Dr. Blue, do you have like one of those magic 8 balls? And
Oh
then
yeah,
you
it's going
can
to be
tell us.
fine.
Yeah.
It's going
Oh,
to be fine. Yeah. I'm hoping that it will be fine. I imagine some colleges will close. I mean, so it'll be some schools won't see a difference.
it'll be less
I have
fine
friends
for
at
those.
small, super snazzy liberal arts colleges, and they said, "Oh yeah, all of their applications went up." You know, like they're fine. You know, they're fine. Go work at Gustavus Adolphus. It's great, but it's hard to predict the future, and I cannot do it. Um, some people are asking about, well, there's one that is quicker maybe, which is Leah's question about asking about the tenure track process in interviews. If you're at a job interview for a tenure track position, they should tell you all of this without your prompting them, but they will always have, even at a phone interview, a do you have any questions for us time, and that is a perfectly good question. Is you can ask about mentoring along the tenure track process. That might happen through the dean's or provost's office. That might happen in your department or someone
Can
else
you can you
outside of your
re-ask
department.
Leah's question? Because I'm
I'm
scrolling
sorry.
furiously.
It's
Please, can you?
how do you ask about the tenure track process in interviews is in a way that is acceptable slash appropriate.
Thank you.
So you can ask about expectations for tenure. You can ask if everybody in the department who goes up for tenure gets tenure. You can talk to some people who have been recently tenured. If you do get a campus interview at a university or a college, know that that will be an exhausting 36 or 48-hour trip, during which you will have the opportunity to meet almost every professor in the department. So you can ask the assistant professors on the tenure track if they are feeling supported. You can ask the associate professors who have recently gotten tenure how that was for them, and if they have started to take deep breaths again after that process. When you are new, you can ask people for their tenure dossiers, and they will be delighted to give them to you because they'll have worked so hard on them and be afraid that only 4 people are ever going to read them. So I think it is appropriate during a job interview to be looking forward to where you want to be 5 years ahead in that place.
Yeah, and I think that doing that after you've done some homework is always kind of the best way to go. So those questions that that Jennifer shared are great questions to ask after you've looked on the department website and the university website, just to kind of see get a lay of the land. Then you can ask follow-up questions as well.
Right, and that usually even on a phone interview and certainly at an in-person interview, there'll be a lot of times when people are looking to you to ask questions, and so that's a perfectly safe time to bring it up. Thank thinking,
Yeah.
I'm hoping to get tenure there. What will that be like? And some places, one of my friends is in a union at her school, and they just said you have to bring in this many grant dollars and this many publications and have this standard of rating on your student evaluations, and boom, you're done. A lot of places are much more fuzzy and just say, do enough. Show
Yeah, and
that you're
that might be a
active.
little bit of a red flag, and it's
Show that
important.
you're active. Have
Yeah.
some piano concerts. It'll be fine, they'll say.
Once you get to the campus interview stage, you should be interviewing them pretty hard, not just them interviewing you hard, because you don't want to take a job. You want to take the job, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it's really not fun to be in a place that's, where the people around you don't share your values, or the university's not aligned with what you care about, or you just take a job because you're like, oh, I need a job. It
Right.
doesn't matter. Like, I could just be miserable for a year or two or three, and it's like, you've worked so hard to get to the point of having this advanced degree. It's almost better to be in a related in a related position that you get excited about every day, you know, than the wrong job.
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking about, like, I would rather be like, because I always wanted to be on a tenure track person. I didn't always want to do research. So interestingly, my first position that I had, like, I had a really negative attitude about doing research when I got out of graduate school. And there were some really intense people. I went to a very intense, like, school. Like, I went to Arizona State University, and it's like really, really, everybody there is like, it's all about research. It's super intense. And so I took a position at a job where the research, it was about maybe like a 80% teaching and like 20% research. And it was great. Like, I loved it for about the first 5 years. But guess what? People change. And I think it's totally cool to recognize that, when you accept a position, you're not going to work there your whole life. Probably not. I mean, those days are kind of gone. And so I kind of started getting bored. So I started doing more research. And so then I'm like, well, I'm going to crank up my research profile and maybe get a job somewhere where I can do more research. And then it changed. And people are like, well, is that typical? And I think what we have to stop doing is asking that question. I don't think that we should focus on what's typical. I think we need to focus on what you want to do, and how you can use your degree to make a difference and enjoy the work you do. And I know that sounds very altruistic, but I swear I live in that world. I swear, I think we should do that.
Well, and one of our very first questions was, how is the pay? Which by now you have probably looked up my salary and Dr. Yuzerski's salary, both on the link I gave you. Those are publicly available. If you work for the state of Ohio and make more than, I think it's $50,000 a year, which we both do, then you are on a list that people can look up. Because if you are, as I think you are, taxpayers in the state of Ohio, you deserve to know what your money is doing. So if you're looking for a job in, at a state school in Ohio, you can look up and say, I would like to see the salaries of every biology professor at Ohio University, and you can get them. There's a book in King Library, if you're venturing into King Library, where you can get everybody's salary at Miami in one huge notebook. They will hand it to you at the main circulation desk for a couple hours, and you can photocopy everything you like, which is what I did because I started here as a visiting professor. So when I went to interview for my doorbell, for my tenure track job, I definitely photocopied that page. And if you're looking to apply at a, Zoom is asking me if I'm playing music. No, Zoom, it is the doorbell. But if you're looking to apply at a private school, you can say, oh, I see what Miami is paying. Does Oberlin pay differently than that? How is that going? These are awkward conversations, of course, but it is your life. You should know what the salary is going to be and what the benefits are going to be. The benefits in academia are usually pretty good. often include things like tuition for anyone, for you and anyone in your family, sometimes even at other schools. That's, for Miami, it's just Miami, but for some, it's a bigger consortium. So
I wanted to address the comment about, you know, maybe limited jobs in particular areas, whether it be disciplinary areas, whether it be geographic areas, that kind of thing. You know, how choosy can you be? Well, I think this is the hard part. The job market is different every year. Okay, you know, and so what I would recommend is that if there is a particular area where you would like to focus and the competition is ridiculous fierce, that you broaden your view a bit. Okay, so maybe there are like industrial positions that enable you to be in, maybe if teaching is really important, you know, maybe you can be in an industrial position where training and development are things that are part of the job. Okay, so it's not like classroom teaching and it's not like being a professor, but it is a job where you would be responsible for the development of others every day. And so I think it's, you know, having a very, very real look at what is available, and then recognizing that there are lots of ways that you can do the things that you want to do, and trying to figure out, you know, if that viewpoint that you have might be too narrow or not being sure on how to broaden it. That's where I think connections to others in your field becomes really, really important. And I think there was a question about networking, like, because we used to drop into conferences, right? And we did our networking that way. Now you have to be a lot more deliberate, right? You know, you have to like reach out to somebody. I know that I've had scholars reaching out over the past year, and you know, I've been invited to do virtual seminars at universities instead of, you know, regular ones like where I would visit. And those seminars, you know, I don't meet with a whole bunch of people. I just meet with a handful of people. And so they say, well, who do you want to meet with when you're after you do your seminar? So I go to the website and I look at all the people and I'm like, ooh, look at this person in educational psychology, or this person in chemistry, or this person in physics. Ooh, I want to meet with them. And then I tell the person, hey, I want to meet. Now I could email that person just out of the blue and say, I want to learn more about your work. Everybody's excited to talk about their work. So work it. You know, it feels so like scary, because here's the thing, the worst thing they could say is no.
or not answer you. But I
Yeah,
mean,
or
I
not
think I
answer you.
can
It's
count
like the
on one
worst thing.
hand the number of emails I've gotten out of the nowhere that say, I just read a paper that you wrote and I think it's awesome. You know what I mean? And the last time someone did that, it was an undergraduate at Miami, and I am definitely going to be mentoring her in research, because
Exactly.
it's like, you already read my paper?
I know.
My
It's so
colleagues
cool.
haven't even read my paper. You're so awesome.
Yeah.
And
So the stuff that sounds really stressful and hard and intimidating, you know, it's not that bad. Again, if you're just recognizing that the worst thing that can happen is you don't hear back or they say no, you don't really have much to lose, especially if you have a very nicely, you know, pleasant, well composed email, and then you're thinking, wow, that's going to be a hard email to write. Well, guess what, you could run that by your advisor and your advisor could help you, or another mentor in your life can totally help you start those conversations. Or better still, they could make an introduction. What if they know that person from the professional networks?
I
So
was going
I
to
do
say,
that
if
all
it's
the
someone
time.
you're reading or hearing about or going to presentations by because they're doing something similar to your advisor, chances are they already know each other,
Yeah, and
at
it's
least by
it's
reputation.
so fun to just, you know, introduce people via email, and you know, and it breaks the ice, right? And it allows that next connection, you know, with the new scholar and maybe this more established person. And it's super fun and comfortable, because it's like, for your mentor, one of the most exciting things for them is to help you really enter the field, and not just by doing cool research and publishing cool works, right, but become a part of the research community that they're in. And so I think they'll bend over backwards to support that kind of connection.
We got a couple questions about adjuncts. Sarah asked if it's true you can get stuck in adjuncting. Does taking an adjunct position make you less appealing in a hiring term for a full-time, to a hiring team for a full-time position? And somebody else, Alicia, asked about challenges to teaching as an adjunct while working full-time, which also reminds me of what Davis asked about how can you possibly ever see your family and loved one while you are a professor? That's a sad question, but not unreasonable to ask. And I would say if you've been adjuncting for 10 years after your PhD, that might make you less appealing for a job that will involve doing a lot of research, like possibly. I mean, Ellen can agree or disagree, but if you have been only teaching for 10 years and someone might think you don't know the latest research and you would have trouble setting up a research program, especially to mentor other PhD students. But I know when we were last hiring for a teaching only position, which are available in almost every department and almost every university, we were thrilled to find someone who had been adjuncting for 10 years because we said, she knows how to teach, because we got people. You all are right about the narrow job application. We were hiring for a teaching only position, and we had some people who had very little experience teaching. They'd been a teaching assistant 10 years ago and then finished a PhD and done a couple of postdocs. And we said, we have no real evidence on paper that that person even really wants a teaching only job. Maybe they only want that until they find something that they like better. And Leah is giving network advice here in the chat, so be sure you read her wisdom. And make sure I get the other adjuncting question, which is how much fun is it to adjunct while you have a full-time job? Well, then you'd be working more than a full-time job, so that is only moderately fun if you have other things to do like hobbies and families. And cooking real meals and all of that, but it's
It would,
not.
like, some of us get super bored when they're not busy.
Yeah.
So it's
not
like
a bad idea. And I know a lot of people, for example, in the School of Business are business people. Look how much I know about business. They do business all day, most days, and then Monday, Wednesday afternoon, or Tuesday, Thursday afternoon, or one night a week, they also teach a class about business. Oprah Winfrey is a professor some of the time, but that is not her full-time job. Full-time job is
I love that Oprah was mentioned during our session today.
Oprah's an adjunct professor awesome. Some of the time. Sometimes
that's cool.
Hollywood people are adjunct professors some of the time. So that might happen a little bit more often in departments where people are being practically trained, like business and music and art, but I'm sure it happens all the time, really. And it's not a bad way to keep your foot in your door. I mean, some people who are not working in academic life will still try to publish a paper once every year or two with the people that they know to get their name out there a little bit. And some people adjunct a little bit to get their name out there a bit, just to keep your options open to come back.
Yeah, I mean, that whole like, what have you done for me lately kind of thing seems to be a big deal in the academy, but I'm guessing it's that way in all other, work circles, right? People are looking at, what's recently going on in people's lives to inform, do they have the skill set to do this new job? So I think that's kind of a thing. So I think we've done a decent job with the questions, but I'm not positive that we have answered every single one. So if you have a question that was asked in the chat that was not addressed either at all or to your satisfaction, can you repaste it and just so it comes up? And that way we'll make sure that we go loop back, because we appreciate you being here and we want to make sure that you get out of it what you would like.
If you scroll up to 1213, we can find Sarah and Davis. And Davis asked that hard question about balancing the collision of your personal lives with the inflexible academic career. And academic career is actually pretty flexible. Um, People joke very meanly that, if you're a professor, you can choose which 65 hours a week to work. And there is a little bit of both a happy and a sad truth to that. So it's easy for me to make doctor's appointments during the day and decide to mow my lawn in the morning of a weekday if that's the best time to mow my lawn. That kind of thing. That kind of thing is flexible. Of course, I have to go to my classes and prepare for my classes. So those are the miniature deadlines, the classes and the grading. And really, if I'm looking at my research life, I think I'm lucky when I have a deadline because that helps me with procrastination problems. If I just feel like, oh, I did this interesting thing and I could write that up at some point, sometimes those things sit on my to-do list for 5 years. So it's possible. I think Ellen talked about interviewing the school when you're going for especially a campus interview, which means that you're one of their very favorite people already, and they're already kind of invested in you and that they flew you to their town. So I would ask people how many hours a week they work, ask them if they talk about vacations at work, if people talk about their children at work, if everybody in the department has a full-time stay-at-home partner to do all the house stuff. That is probably something you can find out at a campus interview. But increasingly, I think as the academy gets younger, it's getting better about that. So when people lump all millennials together in a group, one of the nice things people say about millennials is they're not going to take that crap anymore. So, I swore on the thing that is being taped. But I think people who
I think crap is a low-level swear word.
Crap is a low-level swear. So people who are younger than me, I think, are getting better and better at putting limits around their work lives. But it is very difficult because you're never done. And I know some of you, if you have partners who aren't graduate students, might have already heard that question. When are you going to be done with your work? And the answer is never. If you're interested in your work and you're excited by it, there's always some more teaching work you could do. There's always some more research work you could do. There's always some more service work you can do. I think I get to places where I don't have anything I absolutely have to do before Monday, and then I feel thrilled. So there are those pauses.
Yeah, I think the word work is a little bit of a trap, because there are lots of things that I do that are associated with my official work that I would do anyway, because I'm so curious and invested, and it's so fun, and I think it's quite clever that I've figured out how people could pay me for that. That doesn't mean it's all that way. Some of it's less fun, but it's part of the work. But the way we relate to our work is really important, I think, and that's another kind of framing idea as you think about what do you want to do next, and what kind of relationship do you want to have with your work, right? That defines what type of job you might want to sign up for. So
yeah, and I hope this is not a comment we end on, so someone else get ready to say something inspiring, because I want to push back a little bit on what Ellen just said and say, people say, oh, professors do their work and teachers all over the world are doing their work because they love it. And while it is true that I would keep doing my job if I won the lottery, I also really appreciate that lovely salary that I know you have all just looked up on that site. And it is like my job better because it also pays me a good wage. Yeah. And so sometimes people try to take advantage of people who have a real passion for their work and say, well, you get to teach, so of course we can pay you $20,000 a year and you'll just be happy because you're teaching. Mm-hmm. And you might be happy because you're teaching, but you also will be having trouble buying the kind of food you want to eat.
Right. So I think I can say that because I've already done some of the hard negotiating, and really pushing to make sure that my worth is recognized, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's at that point, which is a really privileged place to be, and I've worked hard to get there. You get there, and then you can say, "Hey, I'm doing this because I love it," right? But
Right.
having the right people around to support you and mentor you to really advocate for yourself in a way that's constructive and leads to the outcomes you want, it's really, really important. I think it's hard to ask people to do that on their own. And I think it's perfectly important, perfectly acceptable and important for you to reach out and find those trusted mentors that can support you. So people are
Yeah.
having to go, and we're ending on time. Yes, let's end on time.
Right. And I think it does totally matter. Remember, if you do get interviews for jobs, that you should be interviewing them, because I think if you were
Yes.
working in retail or food service or just some office, I've only once worked in some office. It was kind of fun. The job is much better if you like the people you're working with. So
Absolutely.
if you go and the people that you're having meals with and the people you're interviewing at your interview, they all rub you the wrong way, that's probably not a good job for you. So make sure you work with people who you like, because that will help a lot. And then ask them to pay you a lot of money. That also
Yes.
helps a lot.
Yes. And if anybody has questions on negotiating their first salary, you can follow back up with Jennifer and myself. We'd be happy to talk with you about
Yep.
that, because that's really important. And people that don't negotiate, bad move. Gotta negotiate. All right, team. Well, we should bounce, and you should bounce. Go back to doing all of the cool things that you're doing. Thank you for joining us. We really
Oh, good.
appreciate.
The graduate school is putting on a lot of these. I'm glad you're going to come back to them. Some of the people here from the grad school are, I'm sure, excited to hear that as well.
Yes,
So,
indeed. All right. So
yeah.
thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you so much, Jennifer and Ellen. I will post the session on YouTube if anyone wants to reference it after.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
weekend.
Have a great weekend. It's Friday. Woo.